godly leadership look like? Moses was called to lead the nation of Israel while leading sheep, after murdering a man. But he had a powerful encounter with the living God that completely changed his life and his reason for living. God took a man who was hiding in a faraway land and made him one of history's greatest leaders. What about you? God is still looking for leaders. Will you hide? Will you say no? Will you refuse your calling, or will you step up and lead?
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to encourage you to take your Bibles, open me to Numbers 14. Numbers chapter 14, you'll find that on page 122 if you're using one of the Bibles from the chair in front of you. This is the last of two messages for this summer series on biblical leadership. We just have this week and next week, and then we'll have a short rhythm series that we started last year that I just hope becomes an annual thing as we go into each September, just getting us reset into the normal rhythms of the Christian life after a long 2 or 3 months of summertime. And then we're going to jump back into the book of Romans with Romans chapters 15 and 16 that'll take us all the way through the end of November and bringing that great book that we've been walking through now off and on for the last number of years. We'll bring that to a conclusion here by the end of November. But I want to jump in this morning by reminding us of our premise statement. You're going to see this today. You'll see it next week for the last time. I hope it's gotten a little bit of traction in your mind, especially if you're in any kind of leadership position. But leadership in its most refined definition is about influencing others towards the achievement of a shared goal. It both reveals and refines one's character. And for the last couple of weeks, this is the aspect of leadership that we've been talking about, including this week, in refining and revealing one's character. Leadership is essential to the mission of the church. Therefore, we must strive to be equipped and ready to lead others towards God's good ends in the home, in the church, and in the community. And this week, we want to talk about the necessity and the power of compassion. This English word compassion is really complex when we think about it in terms of its biblical implications. That single word compassion in English represents 4 different Hebrew words and 6 different Greek words. And so we think about it it's not this monolithic idea, but it actually has quite a few flavors to it. Let me walk you through some of those flavors so you have a sense of what we're talking about this morning. So being compassionate would have a sense of having pity on someone, literally just feeling sorry for someone because of the state that they're in. It has the idea of feelings of affection or tenderness, and because you have this sense of tenderness towards someone, you might moderate your response to them or your behaviors towards them. You have compassion on them. You act moderately towards them because you care about them. You have affection or tenderness towards them. It has the idea of being merciful or forgiving towards another person, moderating your anger towards them, even when their actions might deserve more severe treatment. It's that idea of compassion of, hey, this person just lashed out. Maybe they said something, maybe they did something, and it was hurtful. But it's that state of being where you think, that's not the person I know them to be. I don't know why they did what they did, but I'm not going to respond according to what they did. I'm going to respond according to the person that maybe I know them to be. It's the idea of assuming the best about a person, not necessarily the worst about a person. Biblically, this idea of compassion has this sense of empathy. Empathy means trying to feel what another person feels. It's the willingness to enter into their struggle, trying to, we might say, walk a mile in their shoes. It's the idea of trying to see a situation from their perspective. It's the idea of coming alongside someone and saying to them, help me understand what you're going through. That's empathy. It's you understand what pain is like, and so when you see someone else in pain, you're moved by that. You're not indifferent towards it. We don't have cable TV anymore, but I found it alarming when we did have cable how quickly I could turn the commercial for starving children and not feeling anything toward that. That's dangerous. Empathy is a willingness to feel what others feel, to enter into their circumstances. But biblically, compassion doesn't just end at empathy, it can also give way to sympathy. Sympathy is apathy with hands and feet. Or not apathy, empathy with hands and feet. Sympathy is the idea that I know that pain hurts, and so I don't just feel bad when you feel bad, but I'm going to actually do something to relieve your suffering. I'm going to take an action to try to make your sorry or sad or painful situation a little bit better. So empathy leading to sympathy. And then finally, there's an idea of having this willingness to suffer with another. So for us, it's this single English word of compassion, but biblically speaking, it has a lot of flavor to it, and trying to understand what all of those things mean. And I would contend this morning, it's hard to impossible to get through life without compassion. That at some point in your life, you can probably look back and you can recognize that there was a moment in time when a person showed you compassion. Maybe they felt pity for something that you were going through, and they did something to try to make your situation better. Maybe it was someone who was willing to enter into your suffering and your pain, your difficult or sorry circumstance, and try to just come alongside and encourage you. Maybe somebody saw what you were going through, and they did something decisively to pull you out of that difficult circumstance. I was thinking this week, when did I first experience the power of compassion? My mind immediately went back to when I was 14 years old. My dad walked out on us when I was 13, and he completely abandoned us when I was 14, and I never saw him again. And so here I am at 14 years old, and I've got a mother and an older sister and a younger sister, and so I'm the only male in the house, and my dad's abandoned us, and how I translated that is now I'm the man of the house. I've got to hold this thing down for everybody's good, but the reality was I was barely holding myself together. I'd been working since I was 12 years old, so I'm trying to earn money. I'm trying to support the family as best as I could because my mom was supporting us on food stamps and welfare and a very small disability check and so on. So we didn't have much, and so how do I contribute to the household? And because I'm the man of the house, I've got to bear this burden. One afternoon, my mom wasn't home, but my sisters and I were, and my little sister came out of her bedroom and she did something annoying, which in my mind was not uncommon for her to do. But I said to her, "Go to your room." And unsurprisingly to any of you, she didn't obey me. She thought she didn't have to do what I told her to do. And so then I began to explain to her that since Dad left and Mom wasn't home, I'm the man of the house. She's got to do what I tell her to do. And she's telling me that she doesn't have to do anything that I tell her to do. And so we're getting loud with each other at this point. And my older sister comes out of her bedroom, and now she's like in between us. And so she's in my face, and she's telling me that nobody has to listen to me, and I'm not as important as I think I am. And so it's just getting louder and louder, and we get to the point where she just smacks me right across the face. And at this point, both of us are just doing what Walter trained us to do. Get loud and punch first. And so I start to freak out. And so I just tell her, "Hit me again." And so she does. And as she hits me again, I take a step towards her and I say, "Hit me again." And she does. But now she's taken a step back. I take another step forward. "Hit me again." And she does. And she takes a step backwards as I take a step forward. And this goes all the way down the length of our hallway where I'm yelling her, "Hit me, hit me, hit me." And she's hitting me and she's hitting me. And all the while she's backing up and I'm moving forward. I never lay a hand on her, but I back my sisters all the way into my older sister's room, and they slam the door shut. I go into my room, I slam the door shut, and I lose it. I grab my dresser and I throw it on the ground. I flip my bed. I start destroying everything. And while I'm busting, all my stuff just melting down. I didn't know it, but they ran across the street to a lady that we grew up calling Aunt Sandy. And Aunt Sandy, unbeknownst to me, came over and she was standing outside my door. And she's listening to me freak out. I'm yelling, I'm cussing, I'm breaking all my stuff. I mean, I'm just making a mess. And all the while, she's standing outside the door. And when I was completely spent and I didn't have anything left, I just sat down on the floor at that point. She opens the door. She walks in. She never says a word. She just sits down next to me, puts her arm around me, and let me bawl all over her shoulder. Now, she could have called the police. And if she'd have called the police, it wouldn't have been unjustified. But instead, in that moment, she chose to enter in to all that pain and anger and confusion and everything that was inside of me that all came out in a moment in time. She chose to enter into that. And she chose just to be present with me. That's compassion. It changed my life. That never happened to me again. Because she made a choice to show compassion to me in that moment. Compassion is a powerful thing. And this morning, as we get into Exodus 14, we're not going to see compassion commanded. Nowhere in the text are we going to see God commanding us to show compassion to one another. But I think what we're going to see is we're going to see it illustrated. And there's power in those illustrations. And then, Lord willing, from there, go and do likewise. Numbers 14, 1 through 10. Then all the congregation raised a loud cry, and the people wept that night. And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, would that we would have died in the land of Egypt, or would that we have died in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to one another, let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly and of the congregation of the people of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had spied out the land, tore their clothes and said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Then all the congregation said to stone them with stones. But the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the people of Israel. This whole episode follows on the heels of an evil report, if you're familiar with the account of the Exodus, an evil report by 10 of the 12 spies that Moses had sent into the promised land to spy it out and to report back on what are the cities like, what is the land like, what are the people like. And they come back and 10 of the 12 give an evil report where they say, we're like grasshoppers in their sight. Their giants are in the land. Their cities are large and walled and so on. There's no way we can take the land. And so they've come back and given this evil report, and now the whole nation is they're freaking out. They're like, we can't do this. God is not faithful. God is not able. God will not keep his word. We're going to cross over the Jordan to try to take the land, and he's going to break all of his promises, and we're going to get slaughtered, and not just us, but they're going to kill our babies too. I would suggest to you that the problem isn't that the people were too big. The problem was that in their mind, God was too small. Notice again what Joshua and Caleb said, beginning in verse 7. They said to all the congregation of the people of Israel, the land which we passed through to spy it out is an exceedingly good land, just like God said it was. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread to us. They're nothing to us. They're not an obstacle to us. Their protection is removed from them, and definitively they say, the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. 4 times they speak of the Lord and his power to go before them, his power to deliver the land into their hand, his power to bring a victory over these things. And their response to that is to belittle God in their mind and to want to stone them to death. The question I ask as I read this is why? The answer that I came up with is because the faithless and the cowardly only ever see the obstacles. The faithful and the courageous, they see the obstacles too, but they're able to see through those obstacles to the God who can remove those obstacles. They're able to see through those obstacles to the God who can bring down mountains, who can calm raging seas, who can make a way when there seems to be no way. Have you ever read the gospel accounts and asked yourself, why are there so many miracles in the gospels? According to most commentators, there's 37 unique miracles in the Gospels, beginning with Jesus turning water into wine. I would argue one of the most significant miracles that are recorded of Jesus in the Gospels is him turning water into wine. Not just because it's the first, but because it actually pictures for us salvation. Imagine what's taking place there at the wedding in Cana. Jesus takes one thing and he turns it substantively into a brand new thing, and that brand new thing is of the highest quality. That's what happens in salvation. He takes a person who is one thing, he makes them into a new thing, and that new thing is of the highest quality. It is holy, just like him. That's what it means when he calls us saints. We are holy ones. We have been completely transformed. We're not that thing anymore. We're a brand new thing, and the best of that thing can be. We look at the water and the wine and think, well, that's just a neat thing Jesus did at the wedding. And no. It pictures our very salvation. But then he casts out demons and he calms the seas, taking a nap in the middle of the storm. The disciples, many of whom were seasoned fishermen on the Sea of Galilee, are losing it because they think they're going to die. Jesus is taking a nap. Why is he taking a nap? Because he already told them, we're going to cross over and get to the other side. He already told them we're going to make it, but they're doubting him. They wake him up, don't you even care? He stands up and rebukes the wind and the wave, be still, and immediately the sea goes flat. The wind dies. And a great calm comes upon him. And a great awe falls upon the disciples. He walks on water. He feeds the thousands. He raised the dead. This extensive record of divine power is there to make the faithless faithful and the cowardly courageous. These people that are in Numbers 14, these people were eyewitnesses to the 10 plagues in Egypt. They saw God's power, culminating in the 10th plague where the death angel passed over the land of Egypt and slaughtered the firstborn of every household except those who were covered by the blood of the Lamb. They were there at the parting of the Red Sea when Pharaoh's army was bearing down upon them. But God made a way when there seemed to be no way, so that they passed over on dry ground, and the sea swallowed up Pharaoh and his army. They were there at Sinai when God came down on the mountain in smoke and thunder and lightning and fire, and the ground shook underneath their feet, and the voice of the Lord was so awesome and terrifying that they cried out to Moses, you have to speak to us, because if God speaks again, we're all going to die. And yet they get to this point and God can't do it. The people are too big, the cities are too big, the walls are too thick, can't happen. The problem was not that the people were too big. The problem was that in their mind, God was too small, even though they were eyewitnesses to all these displays of power that were meant to turn their cowardice into courage. And it didn't happen. And Joshua and Caleb's courage exposed their cowardice. And their response was, let's kill these guys. And at the end of verse 10, God shows up. Notice verses 11 and 12. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will this people despise me, and how long will they not believe in me, in spite of all the signs that I have done among them? I will strike them with the pestilence and disinherit them. I will make of you a nation greater and mightier than they. God understood that they weren't running from the giants. They were running from Him. And He asked, how long are these people going to reject me? What's it going to take for them to believe in me in light of all that I've already done for them? And it's this repeated rejection of Himself, this repeated rejection of who He had revealed Himself to be, this repeated rejection of all of His blessings that He had bestowed upon them over and over and over again that angered Him and brought Him to the point of disinheriting them. I'm going to cut them off. They're not going to be my people anymore. Nothing for you to worry about, Moses. I'm going to make a brand new people for you, a better people than them. And this sets the stage for what I would argue is Moses' compassionate intercession for them. So this is why we're in this text. Notice verse 13. But Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear of it, for you brought up this people in your might from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land, they have heard that you, O Lord, are in the midst of this people, for you, O Lord, are seen face to face, and your cloud stands over them, and you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and in a pillar of fire by night. Now if you kill this people as one man, then the nations who have heard your fame will say, it is because the Lord was not able to bring this people into the land that He swore to give them, that He has killed them in the wilderness. And now please, Moses is pleading with the Lord, and now please let the power of the Lord be great as you have promised, saying, the Lord is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression, but He will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation. Please pardon the iniquity of this people according to the greatness of your steadfast love, just as you have forgiven this people from Egypt until now. Loved ones, I would contend that this is one of the most powerful prayers in the entire biblical record. If you don't pray this way, you should pray this way. Moses is reminding God of all the ways that God has revealed Himself to Moses. What he's quoting here at the end of the text is God's covenant name. When God passed before Moses and He said, Yahweh, Yahweh, I am, I am. What does my name mean? This is the definition that He provided to him on the mountain. I am the covenant-making, covenant-keeping God who is eternal in existence, who is unsurpassed, unmatched, unequal in power and authority and sovereignty. There's no one like me. I keep my promises. You should pray that way. God, you have said. He reminds God of the promises that He has made. You've said you were going to bring these people out of Egypt and you were going to bring them into the promised land, a land that you promised to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. You should pray that way. One of the most powerful examples, one of the most powerful prayers in the entire Bible. But once again, what we see here is Moses interceding and pleading with God on behalf of a rebellious and stiff-necked people. And what we see over and over again throughout the Exodus account is Israel rebels against God, God gets angry, and Moses consistently intercedes for them. Prays for them, prays for God's mercy and grace upon them. Notice what the writer of Hebrews had to say about Moses. By faith, Moses, when he was grown, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Verse 25, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking for a reward. Again, notice verse 25, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God. You remember our definitions of compassion? choosing to suffer with someone so they don't have to suffer alone. Moses yoked himself to these people in all their rebellion and all of their failings and was willing to identify with them, was willing to feel what they were feeling, was willing to endure what they themselves were experiencing, and was willing to come alongside them and say, I'm not ashamed to be among you. I'm not ashamed to identify with you. I'm not ashamed to represent you. That's powerful. But his compassion went beyond empathy, just saying, I'm willing to feel what you feel, but it moved into sympathy. And the way he demonstrated that sympathy was by being willing to consistently intercede and pray for them. That's where we see the compassion of Moses over and over and over again. He stood between them and the wrath of God over and over and over again. Can you imagine how scary that would be? But I want you to notice another text that tells us this wasn't a one-time thing. The prayer that we're seeing here was not just this one-time prayer that Moses prays. Notice Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is the second law. It's the second recitation of the law. Just at the end of Moses' life, the people are getting ready to pass over the Jordan, go in and take possession of the promised land. The 40 years had gone by where that rebellious generation that was faithless towards God, they all perished in the wilderness, and now their children and grandchildren are getting ready to cross over and take the land, and Moses is rehearsing the law with them one more time before they do so. And in this text, he's looking back on Numbers 14. He says, you have been rebellious against the Lord from the day that I knew you. Verse 25, so I lay prostrate before the Lord these 40 days and 40 nights, because the Lord has said he would destroy you. And I prayed to the Lord, O Lord God, do not destroy your people and your heritage, whom you have redeemed through your greatness, whom you have brought out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Do not regard the stubbornness of this people or their wickedness or their sin. When we read Numbers 14, we think, okay, God comes down, he's rightfully angry, he's going to disinherit these people, he's going to destroy them, he's going to raise up a new people from Moses to take into the promised land and take possession of it. And we see Moses intercede and pray, and we're left to think, hey, there's this one prayer, it's a good prayer. But when we look at Deuteronomy 9, what we realize is Moses prayed this prayer for 40 days, day and night, laying on his face before the Lord, begging that while as Moses was showing compassion to the people in their weakness and their sin, he's begging God to be compassionate toward the people in their sin. Read the context. This is what he's talking about. And I just have to ask you this question. When was the last time you ever prayed for 40 days straight for anything? When was the last time you ever prayed for 40 days straight for anyone? When was the last time you ever had such a burden on your heart? It was inescapable. It was crushing you. And the only thing you could do was get on your face before God and day and night cry out to him for his provision, for his forgiveness, for his mercy, for the salvation of a sinner still dead in their trespasses and sins. You didn't do anything else. You just went before the Lord and you wept and you pleaded. If I had to go out on a limb and take a guess, I'd say never. And if you had to go out on a limb and take a guess for me, you'd say never, and you'd be right. So what do we conclude about that? Have we never felt such pity for another human being? Have we never felt such urgency? Have we never felt such need? Have we never looked at another person and seen them in their state and just been so brokenhearted by the thing that they're going through that you just got down on your face before God day after day after day saying, I'm not going to stop praying until you do something. Or do we say our prayer and walk away and say, that's good. That's good. I got problems of my own. This is the compassion of Moses in this moment. God was done with them. Moses wasn't. He pled 40 days. and 40 nights. Moses understood the nature of man. He understood the weakness of man. He understood that we're all living in flesh. He understood that he wasn't better than them. He wasn't different than them. He had compassion for them. And the question that we need to ask before we're done is this: is God actually compassionate? And the reality is we don't have to look any farther than Jesus to answer that question. Notice some texts that I put back to back for us. Matthew 14:14 is a powerful example. Notice what it says. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, and he healed their sick. The context of Matthew 14 is that John the Baptist just had his head cut off. John the Baptist is not only the forerunner of Christ, the one who was prophesied to come ahead of Jesus and prepare the people for his arrival, it was also his cousin. And Jesus gets word that John had just been beheaded. And the context of Matthew 14 is Jesus says to the disciples, I need to get away. Let's just go somewhere to a solitary place. Just us. I need to get away. This is Jesus saying, I just want to go away and grieve the death of someone that I loved. But Matthew records that the crowd wouldn't let him. They followed him around the edge. Like they saw the boat. They recognized it was Jesus, so they ran ahead of him, and this great multitude met him on the other side. So he wants to get away just to grieve the loss of a loved one. There's this great crowd there, and he's moved in his heart toward their need. He has compassion for them. He sees them as sheep without a shepherd, and he heals their sick. And then the next thing that happens is he teaches them, and then he feeds 5,000 men, probably 20,000 people altogether. That's the context of Matthew 14. This is Jesus exhausted. This is Jesus grieving. And yet this is the compassion and the willingness to continue to put out for others over and over and over again. Mark chapter 1, again, such a powerful example. A leper came to him, imploring. You read that, you need to think begging him. And kneeling said to him, if you will, you can make me clean. This is right at the beginning of his public ministry, and that this leper was so full of faith in Jesus Christ, seeing in him what so many people missed in him, that he says, if it's your will, I know you can make me clean. And moved with pity, that's our word compassion, moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I will be clean. I love this example because Jesus didn't need to touch him, and the fact that he did would have been scandalous. The leper was the outcast. The leper was the unclean. They had to be shunned outside of the village, outside of the city, outside of the camp, outside of the family. They were not allowed to have visitors. And anytime someone passed by, the leper was required by law to cry out, unclean, unclean. I'm not safe to be around. Don't come over here. You need to leave me alone. Stay away. Not only was the leper shamed, but they were isolated. And Jesus could have just said to him, I will be clean, but he doesn't. He reaches down and he touches it. Why? To say to him, I'm not ashamed of you. I'm not ashamed to identify with you. I'm not ashamed of your disease. I'm not ashamed of your condition. I'm not ashamed of your label. I'm not ashamed of what other people see in you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid to enter into your circumstances and be there with you in that. And he reaches out and he touches the person who probably hasn't felt the touch of another human being since he was diagnosed as a leper. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what that man felt in that moment? Not simply because Jesus said, I will be clean, but can you imagine what he felt when Jesus reached out and he touched him? Can you imagine all that stress and all that anxiety and all that in him from just melting? I'm not alone. Someone's with me. This is who he is. Hebrews 2:14 through 18. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he, Jesus himself, likewise partook of the same flesh and blood, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. For surely it is not angels that he helps, but he helps the offspring of Abraham. Verse 17, therefore. He had to be made like his brothers in every respect so that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in the service of God, to make propitiation for their sins, to totally pay the price for their sin, to satisfy the wrath of God completely and make final and full payment for the sins of the people. For because he himself has suffered when tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Jesus knows that pain hurts, and he's not ashamed of us in it. Jesus knows that life is hard, and he's not ashamed of us when we go through hardship, and he doesn't just empathize. He doesn't just stand back and say, gee, I'm really sorry you're going through that hard thing, but in his compassion, he's willing to enter into that hard thing with us and then work for our good to deliver us from that hard thing. He's not just our empathetic high priest, he is our sympathetic great high priest. The scriptures describe Jesus as being a man of sorrow, acquainted with grief. Can you imagine walking through a crowd of people and hearing every person's prayer all the time? Can you imagine coming into this room every single Sunday and knowing the pain in explicit detail of every person that was sitting around you? Could you imagine coming in here and while Pastor Andy was praying a few moments ago, you're hearing not only his prayer, but everybody else's prayer, and you're hearing them pray for the thing that they would never talk about out loud? That's Jesus in every crowd he was ever in. He knew the hardships of living in flesh far better than any of us ever can. And it was the compassion of Christ that drove him to the cross. To say, I will enter into their suffering, and I will suffer with them, and I will suffer for them to deliver them from that suffering. He is the wounded healer. And here's the rub. He wants us who know him, who have tasted of his compassion, to go out and do likewise. And listen, we make these things so complicated to give ourselves an out. I can't do that. It's not complicated. It's just being willing to come alongside another person and saying to them, help me understand what you're going through, and then what can I do to help? That's it. Help me understand what you're going through. And what can I do to help? Sometimes it's just about being present. Sometimes you don't have to say a word. We think we've got to know what to say when a loved one dies, and I don't know what to say, and I didn't go to calling hours, I didn't call them, I didn't because I didn't want to be awkward, I didn't know what to say. Most of the time you don't have to say anything. You just walk in the room, you grab them by the neck, and you pull them in, and you hug them, and you weep with them. And that's more powerful than anything else. It's the ministry of just being present. When Sandy stood outside my door at 14 years old in the middle of my meltdown, she had a choice to make in that moment. She could have chosen to conclude he's a bad kid, or she could have chosen to believe he's a hurting kid. I'm so thankful she chose to conclude he's a hurting kid. He's full of pain. And this is that. She came in the room and said, I'm not ashamed of you. And you're not alone. And she never said a word. Oh, that we would have the compassionate heart of Christ, the better Moses, to walk among one another and show that compassion to one another. Somebody comes into your life and they say that thing that just makes you mad. They do that thing that just makes you mad. They do that thing that just makes you frustrated. Do you automatically assume about them, they're just a jerk? Or would you dare to ask the question, I wonder what they're going through? I wonder what they've gone through that have made them talk like that. I wonder what they've gone through that have made them act like that. I wonder if there's an opportunity for me to understand their story and understand their circumstances, and I wonder if there's an opportunity for me to help them. We always catch people in the middle of life. Loved ones, we always catch one another in the middle of life. And so sometimes that means that when a kid comes into school, school's not the most important thing on their mind. When someone comes into work, work's not the most important thing on their mind. When someone comes into your home at the end of a day, making their bed's not the most important thing on their mind. And we can conclude they're just a rebellious, stiff-necked jerk. Or maybe we can say, you know what, they're living in flesh just like me. I wonder what they're going through. I wonder what they've gone through, and I wonder what I can do. How can I be helpful? How can I serve them and love them and show the compassion of Christ to them in this moment? You get to make that choice. Over and over again, the nation of Israel was rebellious. And over again, Moses chose to pray and to plead and to stand between. Christ stood between. What about us? The power of compassion to change a life. Will you stand with me? Father, we love you, and we are so thankful for the grace and the compassion that you show us. We are not so different than the nation of Israel. We continually, it seems like, reject your grace. We question your promises. We question who you have revealed yourself to be. We look at our circumstances and we see our circumstances like the giants in the land, and we think that there's nothing that can be done. There's nothing that you can do. We see them as big. We see you as small. And yet you show compassion and mercy. You moderate your response to us. You do not give us what we deserve. We're so thankful that Jesus chose as our sympathetic, our compassionate great high priest to stand between us and your wrath, to bear it in our place as the wounded healer, to make us something qualitatively new. You are a God who spoke creation into existence. You are the God who sustains it now by simply the power of your own will. You just will it to be, and it is. You are the God who dried the Red Sea. You're the God who came down on the mountain. You're the God over the flood. You're the God who caused it not to rain, and you're the God who caused it to rain. You're the God who turned water into wine. You're the God who raised the dead. You're the God who cast out demons. You're the God who walked on water and who calmed the seas. And yet we are so often faithless. And yet you bear with us. You're patient with us. And you give us such great grace and compassion in our weaknesses. So thankful that Jesus is not ashamed of us. That he wasn't ashamed to enter into this experience of life on planet Earth, this life in flesh with all of its weaknesses. So thankful that the scriptures say he's not ashamed to call us brothers. And how often would we look at one another and we're ashamed of each other? We won't identify with and we won't enter in until they get their mess figured out. Would you give us that compassionate heart of Christ? That we might recognize the fact that maybe we didn't choose everybody who's here in this room right now, but by your sovereignty we're all together and many of us are hurting. And many of those hurts are unknown because nobody's ever asked. Father, would you give us that heart that's willing to come alongside another, put an arm around each other and ask and really mean it. How are you doing? How can I help? That we might be willing to weep with one another. We might be willing to sit in silence with one another. We might be willing to bear down in prayer. 40 days and 40 nights. Laboring in prayer for one another. Knowing that you're meeting us there. Knowing that you're doing something good in that. Would you help us to love one another the way you love us? I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.